Hey authors, not to freak you out, but what if that bad thing comes to pass? Could you be okay anyway? I'm Claire Taylor, and I'm going to prove to you that no matter what happens, you can continue to be a writer.
Welcome back to another episode of What If for Authors. I'm glad you're here. My name's Claire Taylor, and I'm an Enneagram certified coach for authors as well as a humor and mystery writer. You can check out my latest book, Sustain Your Author Career, by going to ffs.media/sustain. As anyone who has ever heard of a writer knows, it can be a pretty solitary profession. That's why a lot of us got into it in the first place, frankly. We like that it's something we can do alone. That might be due to the fact that it's an activity where we feel safe to connect with parts of ourselves or explore the world, or maybe it's a place where we have total control over a world, not necessarily in a megalomaniacal way, but in a therapeutic way. Or maybe it's a place where we can explore emotions or create friends we like to spend time with who aren't going to ask us to pick them up from the airport. There's an appeal in getting to create a story on your own time and have a fun place to escape whenever you need that I probably don't have to explain to anyone listening to this. That is not really what this episode is about. This episode is about those moments when we're sitting down to write and the loneliness hits. The social deprivation starts to set in. So this can happen even to the quintessential introvert from time to time. So I think it's worth exploring the question, what if I hate working alone? You might be surprised by how many authors I hear this from. Maybe they don't use the word hate, but they definitely talk about the restlessness and loneliness of too much solitary work and how they miss the dynamism of working on creative projects with other people. I feel that way too. I've been looking for opportunities to work with other people for years now. Some work out well for a while, and some seem promising but don't ever come to fruition. So there's a magic that we each get to hit every so often when we work with people who we just click with. And that magic can become a little bit addictive. We want more. I always think back to this film crew I was on for 7 weeks during the summer after my freshman year of college. It was an internship where we helped teens create short films in various cities around the country. There was a group of 6 of us that went to each of these cities, and it was just an instant chemistry between us. Everyone around us noticed too. They called it a love fest, and it felt like that. Not in a bacchanalian way, but just in the way where the creative collaboration came naturally and we instantly sort of had each other's backs. Literally, because I threw my back out during my week in New York City. I mean, it was really bad. And the crew stepped up by carrying my share of the equipment and bringing me meals at the end of long days and just checking in with me, that sort of thing. When I think about the potential of creative collaboration in a healthy community, I think of that crew. I've experienced tastes of it from time to time in the decades since, mostly in collaborations with just one other person, and it kind of keeps me hungry to experience it again at some point. It also makes the long slogs of solo work just a little less energizing when I remember how effortless it can feel in a solid collaboration. Ultimately, I ended up sticking with creative writing, taking that path instead of the filmmaking path, because I was also aware of how soul-sucking working on a crew could be if someone on it was just on an ego trip instead of genuinely pursuing the best possible product. The threat of that and the likelihood of it happening are what made being a writer a lot more desirable for me. There's nothing shameful about being a writer who struggles to work alone, but you may feel like it. And there's definitely a spectrum to our threshold of how many hours or days at a time we can go without human interaction. So wherever you fall on this spectrum is where you fall. And where you fall this month may not be the same place you fall next month. A lot of people saw their thresholds for human interaction shift during the pandemic. Mine definitely did. It may be best to think of it as a moving target, not reflective of anything about you except a need you have that fluctuates. So some days I need a lot more coffee than others. Some days I need more sleep just because. I can guess at the reasons, and I do, but I also have the option of just allowing that to be what it is and not defining it as a problem. We can treat the amount of social interaction that we need the same way. You need what you need. It's not a problem. So let's just figure out how to get it. Now, the how of getting that interaction is obviously going to be varied based on your life situation. But one of the most common ways to stop working alone so frequently is to join a writing sprint group. You can join these online in basically any time zone you live in. So it's an easy way to feel like you're connecting with others while you also focus on your manuscript. Sometimes our bodies, social creatures that we are, just need to know we're not totally alone. They want to sync with others somehow, and online writing sprints are a great way to do that, regardless of where you live or your ability to leave the house. So that makes it extra great. In my experience working with clients, the Enneagram types that generally benefit from this sort of social syncing the most are 9s, the peacemakers, 7s, the enthusiasts, and 2s, the helpers. That's not to say that other types don't benefit from it, but if you're a 2, 7, or 9, consider whether this would help keep you going on your work in progress, or even just knocking out administrative tasks you hate. I could also see 6s liking this if it was a group of people that they have some trust and rapport with. Otherwise, nah. Now, if you're especially awake as you listen to this, you might be thinking, 2, 7s, and 9s are the positive outlook types. Does this have anything to do with it? No clue. No clue. It certainly is interesting, though, isn't it? The positive outlook types are sometimes called the avoidant types. So maybe that's what they're trying to avoid, is that black hole feeling of being completely alone in this world. And, I can't really blame them. 9s really, really benefit from co-writing because they're so good at going with the flow of the energy around them. 9s, it'll be easier to do a focused activity if someone is doing it simultaneously with you, I promise. And this goes not just for writing, but reading as well. You can sit and read with people. And to be clear, this isn't energy vampire shit we're talking about. This is expert level working with your natural attentional flow. When 9s confirm with me that they get more writing done when they write alongside others, I'll ask, well, why aren't you doing that as much as possible, right? The answer usually boils down to, I shouldn't have to do that. Well, 9's tough shit. It helps you do it. There really aren't shoulds here. 7s especially benefit from pre-gaming their writing with a partner or with a group and connecting to their enthusiasm for the next scene. If you're a 7, you can tap into that fixation of planning just a little bit here to connect with the anticipation of what's happening next in your story until you're like spring-loaded to write it. 7 is the externalized thinking center, so accepting that you like to process externally, it's just very important. It's very useful. Brainstorming with a partner, then the two of you get to writing. That may be a really helpful process for you as a 7. In my anecdotal experience, 2s do like to orchestrate writing sprints for others. If I were to speculate about why that is, it would have something to do with satisfying that need to be helpful long enough for them to get their own words down. So 2s, if you're organizing sprints and it's working for you, keep organizing them. Yes, you're being very helpful. Your 9s and your 7s and other people are very grateful for it. So you've done your good deed and now you get to focus on your writing. But again, the why behind all of this doesn't really matter so much as just how. How do you get what you need? If you're a 1, 3, 4, 5, or 8, or maybe a 6, 2, and group writing opportunities don't help you focus, there are other ways to work with other people. So these ways might be tricky for you if you haven't worked on some of your own patterns of control because they involve more collaboration, which implies cooperation and sometimes concession. And did I just lose all of the 8s here? I don't know. It may be worth our time to look at why each of the types might struggle to work with others in a collaboration, even though they hate working alone or just hitting their limit on it. So let's run through the types one at a time. I said I wouldn't do this every episode. I haven't done this every episode, but I'm going to do it today. So we'll start with the 9s, the peacemakers. So 9s may frustrate a collaboration partner by not showing up. And I don't mean not physically showing up. I mean saying yes or sure to everything rather than never saying no. So when everything is a yes or a sure, it can make people mistrust your yes, right? Your collaboration partners, and they may end up spending a lot of time trying to ensure that you really mean it, suspecting, sometimes correctly, that if you're not a hell yes, you'll end up being dead weight or acting passive aggressively later on down the line when everyone's already committed to the project. Doing the work to be able to identify for yourself anything that isn't an enthusiastic yes, must be a no, or a let me think about it first. Doing that will build trust between you and your collaborator to keep the relationship equitable and lively and energized. 8s, the challengers, tend to struggle with making the necessary concessions to keep a collaboration a true collaboration. 8s, sometimes when you speak, you may not completely be sold on an idea, but your commanding talk style will make it sound like you are, and others may just assume you're set and won't budge. Even your questions, let's be real, even your questions come out as statements sometimes. And while you probably don't mind people pushing back, and you might even enjoy it, not everyone has it in them to push back that vigorously all the time. So 8s can steamroll collaborators over time as a result, until the collaborator just kind of gives up or escapes, which usually feels like being blindsided to the 8. So 8s, if you notice a collaborative partner putting up less of a fight over time, maybe notice your pattern of pushing them even harder to try and get a reaction from them. You might be overwhelming them and causing them to further retreat and check out instead. When your instinct tells you to charge in with someone who has, by and large, proven themselves a trustworthy collaborator, that's when it's actually time to take off the armor and lead with vulnerability. Start asking questions. 7s, the enthusiasts, may, you guessed it, jump ship on a collaboration once it stops being fun, new, exciting, or pain-free. Or you commit to collaborations with an easy out where no one is invested enough to create that satisfying alchemy you're looking for. If you don't want to keep working alone, you got to keep showing up when your collaborator is having a tough day, week, or even month. Because humans go through tough days, weeks, and even months. So if you want to collaborate with humans, kind of part of the deal. When you feel like making a break for it, 7, try instead to go deeper. Use the collaboration as an opportunity to experience those emotions you've been putting off limits to yourself. Meet your collaborator where they're at and sit through the discomfort to unlock a richer connection than you imagined possible. 6s, the loyalists, tend to thrive on group commitments, so collaboration can be incredibly fun. But obviously, there's a caveat. If you're a 6 who hasn't worked through your issues around authority or begun to unpack those, there's a good chance you're picking crappy, exploitative, or even abusive collaborators over and over again, only complicating your relationship with trust. A lot of 6s have stopped trusting their ability to identify a trustworthy person and will jump into a partnership or collaboration blindly, only to be burned in the same way by the same type of person over and over again. If this describes your life, 6s, start looking for where you're mistaking trustworthiness with something else. Are you assuming that someone's power represents their trustworthiness, their self-confidence, a lack of a healthy level of doubt? Try observing a person for a while before entering into a collaboration with them to see if those around them are loyal out of fear or love. Once you're in a collaboration, you can also practice extending the person the benefit of the doubt, which will keep you from over-interpreting things as betrayal and allow you to feel more grounded to maintain the relationship over the long term. 5s, the investigators, tend to keep such strong boundaries up in collaborations that the other person may be left wondering if they're still in a partnership anymore. 5s, check in to see if your belief that other people are energy sucks is keeping you cut off from the energy boost that an open and vulnerable collaboration can provide. People who are not 5s may take your days of silence and lack of communication to mean something that you don't intend, so it falls to you to keep the communication flowing, even if that means communicating that you need a couple of days to not communicate and it's not their fault, they haven't done anything wrong. But do question whether you actually need as much time alone as you think, or if you're just used to that and your collaboration muscles are a little atrophied over the years. Oftentimes, the answer to most of a 5's problems is to open up more to other people, not to shut them out. But if that's your pattern, shutting people out, yeah, you may struggle to maintain collaborations for long. 4s, the individualists, can sometimes struggle in collaborations if they center their emotions and inner state above the other person's. So as the internalized feeling center type, 4s, you spend a lot of time looking inward to understand your emotions and perspective, and that's great for self-expression. But sometimes it can lead to believing that your expression is more authentic than everyone else's, which tends to rub other authors and creatives the wrong way and can lead to a rift in collaboration. It can also lead to a cycle where the four ends up in breakup after breakup with artistic collaborators and cultivates the idea that no one understands them or that working with others somehow corrupts or prohibits the truest form of their expression. If this hits close to home for any fours listening, the fix is actually pretty simple. Remember that the other person's ideas and contributions are just as true and authentic as yours. And when you combine the two to create something, you get something even more universal out of it. Threes, the achievers, can find themselves impatient with collaborations with others, especially if the other person wants to take their emotions into consideration or slow down to take precautions or think things through. Threes, your love for efficiency can lead you to start to wonder why you're taking on the dead weight of a collaboration if it doesn't 10x the speed of the process. This attitude might put strain on the collaboration as it's expressed as, hey, this thing that matters to you, that quality, depth, richness, whatever, doesn't actually matter to sales or rank, so I don't see why we're wasting time on it. If you notice that you get impatient in collaborations frequently, you can use that as a call to slow down and connect with your emotions and what you care about in art to create something that's better than the sum of its parts. Twos, the helpers, can struggle in collaborations because, I don't know how to say this other than you tend to pick people who really need you. And then they keep on needing you forever until you start to wonder about whether they would show up for you if you needed them. Or worse, they stop needing you. And that feels like rejection, which can lead to some interesting interpersonal results. Twos tend to yo-yo from a ton of collaborators to zero collaborators until they can address how to pick collaborators and opt for a criteria other than they need me. Maybe you have chemistry with the collaborator that helps you express yourself. Maybe that's the criteria. Or they feel like a safe person to be messy and needy around. Maybe they really have their shit together, and that's actually refreshing energy for you. Not because you don't have your shit together, but because you keep picking people who seem to need so much help. If you see yourself switching from a lot of collaborations to desiring to be totally solo and possibly like scorch earthing everything to make it happen, the criteria for how you pick your collaborators might be something to look at. Because what the twos tend to do is help until they're out of gas, nothing left to give, and then cut everybody off, which not great for collaborations. But when twos can be met with the same helpfulness in someone else, it's beautiful. And finally, ones, the reformers, can struggle to keep collaborators because, let's face it, we have an idea about how something ought to be done, and we're not afraid to nitpick people until it's done that way. So our sensitivity to criticism can also mean that the necessary feedback loop of a collaboration can feel like nonstop criticism. And now that can cause ones to retaliate at their collaborator for giving them, just basic feedback on something. Additionally, the ones focus on fairness can get out of hand with a tit-for-tat mentality that doesn't necessarily respect the large-scale ebbs and flows of a collaboration over time. So ones, you can stop keeping score, and you can start trusting that your gut will speak up if the contribution gets too out of balance for too long. Tap into your heart center a little more to extend compassion and grace to your collaborator from time to time. The same compassion and grace that you may struggle to give to yourself. And if you do that, the relationship is likely to last longer. Now, these are just some initial lines of inquiry for each type to look at for what work they have to do to make partnerships and collaborations more viable as an option in their career. We can't change the patterns of others, but no matter who we are, we have patterns that keep us disconnected from others that we can start to own and address and chip away at. I will say it sucks to stop blaming other people for all the failed friendships, relationships, and partnerships in our past, but learning how we contributed personally to the downfall is some of that essential shadow work that really moves mountains if we're brave enough to take it on. I'm not talking about beating yourself up here because punishment and accountability aren't the same thing. I hope you hear that. Punishment and accountability are not the same thing. I'm talking about going, oh yeah, that is a thing I always do, and I can see how it's not getting me the results I hoped for. Maybe I'll play around with a new approach and see if that works better. Blaming others may seem like a great way to avoid pain, but what it tends to do is distract us from the part that we played, perhaps a small part, but a part all the same, which keeps us locked into the tired old patterns until finally we're ready to turn our attention away from what others did to bring about the outcome and really start to look at ourselves. And that's where the liberation comes from. So doing so is painful, but it blasts away the mechanisms of constriction that make connecting deeply to others difficult or exhausting. And oftentimes, those mechanisms of constriction are what make working solo so much more preferable until it's not. But doing this work of spotting how the patterns in our relationships reflect patterns in ourselves is a great way to make connecting with others seem much less terrifying and much more enjoyable and fulfilling. So if you're an author who hates working alone, there are a few things you can look at. First, stop questioning whether your need for working alongside others or collaboratively with others is normal, and just go get what you need. Figure out what that could look like and then start pursuing it and asking for it. And secondly, do some of the work around your type and how your patterns may be straining your ability to feel truly connected to others in the way you're craving, be that creatively, emotionally, intellectually, physically, or spiritually. Own your patterns. Ask if they're actually doing the thing you thought they would do, and then try something new if needed. You are still a quote-unquote real author if you hate working alone. Fuck anyone who tries to gatekeep who is or isn't a real author. Practice radical acceptance of what you need to keep telling your stories and then continue refining your approach to getting that. It's just that simple and that tricky. But I know you can get there. If you reflect on your life, you can see how you've already made progress in that direction. So keep going. Even if you consider yourself an awkward person, which many of us authors do, this work will help you feel more connected to others. So that's it for this week's episode. We're heading toward the new year, and I'm making some moves over here ahead of 2025. Got big things coming down the pipeline to help authors like you meet other authors you might want to collaborate or co-work with in the future. So stay tuned and make sure you're signed up for my email list at ffs.media/join. I'm Claire Taylor, and I hope you'll join me for the next episode of What If for Authors. Happy writing.